In a world built on wealth, power, and secrets, Chinyere thought she had finally won after burning down a building along with her blood sister in it. But what if Ngozi wasn't gone after all? What if the flames didn't destroy her sister, but rather set the stage for something far darker? As the family fortune looks almost in Chinyere's grasp, the chilling truth begins to surface. In this second part of our story, the dark web of deceit that Chinyere carefully wove begins to unravel. The aftermath of her action reveals just how deep the consequences of her actions truly go. Ngozi will return, whether dead or alive, or through her hidden son, setting the stage for a deadly game where nothing is as it seems. Subscribe to Savannah Storytime as the stakes get higher and the secrets darker. What happens next will leave you questioning everything. The game is just beginning. The fire still burned in Chinyere's mind, long after the smoke had cleared. The flames that had consumed Ngozi's life, her future, her dreams, were supposed to have sealed her fate, but something gnawed at Chinyere's soul. The question lingered in her mind, tormenting her, refusing to let go: is Ngozi truly gone? The days had stretched on in a cruel haze. Chief Okafor, Chinyere's father, had died in the hospital. She had watched as her father's passing had left the family in mourning, and she had seized the opportunity to grasp the power she had always craved. But Ngozi's absence felt wrong, as if the very world around her had tilted out of place. The days following, Chief Okafor's family had come together, not just to honor the man who had once ruled the Okafor Empire, but to decide who would take the reins. Chinyere felt secure, her confidence high as she stepped into the room where the meeting would unfold. This was her moment, her victory. The will was clear: she was the rightful heir, and no one could stand in her way. But as the gathering proceeded, a voice cut through her certainty. Mrs. Ifani, a powerful and respected shareholder in her early 50s, stood, her presence commanding the room. With the air of someone who knew exactly how to make waves, she began to speak. "There is another issue we must address," Mrs. Ifani said, her voice steady and sure. Chief Okafor had a son. A son who could very well be the rightful heir to the Okafor legacy. The room fell silent. Chinyere stiffened, her heart hammering in her chest. She shot a quick glance to Mr. Kanu, seated beside her, but his expression was unreadable. His eyes met hers for a moment, and the faintest of smiles curled on his lips. It was the smile of someone who knew something that she did not, and that smile sent a chill down her spine. "Impossible," Chinyere muttered, more to herself than anyone else. The claim was absurd. Chief Okafor had only 2 daughters, Ngozi, whom he doted on, and herself, who had worked tirelessly for the family. There was no son. But Mrs. Ifani continued, unwavering in her assertion. "It has come to my attention that there is, in fact, a male heir. A son, who was kept hidden from the public for years." Chinyere's thoughts raced as she tried to process what she was hearing. The woman's words reverberated in the silence that followed. If we are to truly honor Chief Okafor's legacy, then it is only right that a man should take charge of the family. At least, until Chinyere marries and can share the responsibilities. It was as if the ground had shifted beneath Chinyere's feet. A man. She had been the one to endure years of hard work, sacrifice, and dedication to the family business. She had been the one to hold it all together while Ngozi had been adored for her charm and beauty. She was the rightful heir, not some unknown son. Chinyere's pulse quickened as she stood abruptly. "There is no other child," she declared, her voice louder than she intended. She felt a surge of fury rise within her. How dare they question her claim? How dare they? It was then that Mr. Kanu, the one person who had always been her ally, stood up. His voice, though quiet, was sharp with an edge Chinyere had never heard before. "You can't disrespect my mother like that, Chinyere," he said, his eyes dark with anger. Enough of this. Enough of seeing me as your servant. I've had enough of this. The words hit Chinyere like a slap to the face. She blinked in confusion, a chill creeping up her spine. Mr. Kanu, the trusted confidant, the one who had always been by her side, was now standing against her. The room seemed to tilt, everything spinning out of control. His voice lowered but grew more intense. I am not a servant to you, Chinyere. I am your brother, Chief Okafor's son. For a moment, there was a deafening silence. The words sank in slowly, like poison spreading through Chinyere's veins. Mr. Kanu's confession shattered everything she had believed about him. She stared at him, her mouth dry, her mind racing to process what he had just said. He continued, his voice unrelenting, Chief Okafor gave me some privileges, but he kept me a secret. I took my mother's surname. But now, it's time for the world to know. I am the true heir to this family's legacy. Chinyere looked around the room, her head spinning. The elders, some of whom had known about this secret for years, now shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The weight of the truth hung heavy in the air, and for the first time in her life, Chinyere felt completely exposed. Mrs. Ifani nodded, confirming everything Kanu had just revealed. She stood, proud and unyielding, and presented documents, birth certificates, legal papers, everything that would solidify Kanu's claim. The room erupted into murmurs as the elders processed the shocking revelation. As the truth settled in, Chinyere opened her mouth to protest, to fight back, but Mr. Kanu moved closer, his eyes filled with cold determination. Don't bother, Chinyere. You've already lost. I have evidence. Proof of everything you did to Ngozi. Proof that you were at the warehouse that night. You think you can get away with this? Chinyere's stomach twisted. Her mind raced to process what was happening, but it all felt like a blur. How could Kanu, her confidant, her accomplice, turn against her so effortlessly? Before she could react, Kanu leaned in closer, his voice low and filled with venom. I'll say you threatened me, Chinyere. And as the rightful heir, I'll be pardoned. The family will let you rot in jail for what you did to your sister. His words cut through her, leaving no space for denial. Chinyere couldn't fight back, couldn't find her voice. She knew that Kanu held all the power now, and she was at his mercy. Kanu wasn't just taking control of the family business, he was threatening to destroy her. With a harsh exhale, Kanu dropped the bombshell that would shatter everything. You're wrong about everything. You've been lying to yourself this whole time. I am the rightful heir. Chinyere stood frozen, the words cut through her like a blade. The room felt like it was spinning. She couldn't breathe, couldn't move. The shock was too overwhelming. The revelation that Kanu was her half-brother was impossible to grasp. For the first time, Chinyere saw the full extent of the conspiracy. She had been so sure of her position, so certain that her father's death would leave her in control of everything. But she was wrong. Kanu had been the master planner all along, his rise to power, his quiet manipulation, everything was part of a larger scheme. As Kanu turned to the group of stakeholders, they all looked at him with a mixture of awe and fear. The shift had happened, and there was no going back. In that moment, Chinyere realized that her fight had been futile. She had lost. Kanu was not only the rightful heir. He had won. With a slow, calculated motion, Mrs. Ifani raised her hand. A wave of silent approval swept through the room. Kanu, her son, would take over. He had earned the votes, he had earned the power, and he had manipulated the situation so perfectly that even Chinyere, who had once controlled everything, couldn't stop it. Chinyere stood there, silent and broken, as the reality of her defeat settled in. The votes were cast, the future was decided, and the empire was no longer hers. The man she had trusted was now the ruler of the family, and her role in it was reduced to nothing more than a fleeting memory. The days that followed Chinyere's defeat were thick with guilt and shame. She couldn't bring herself to face the family, nor could she find the strength to look in a mirror. She had once believed that everything was within her grasp, that she had earned her place at the head of the family's empire. But now, her dreams had crumbled into dust, and she was left with nothing but the weight of her actions. In the solitude of her room, she began to reflect on the happy moments she had shared with Ngozi, her sister, before ambition had poisoned their bond. She had destroyed the very person who had always been there for her, and for what? Power. Wealth. The love she had never received from their father. But even that wasn't enough to satisfy the ache deep within her. It was then that she made an impulse decision, a need for peace, perhaps, or just the desperate hope that she could find some absolution for the sins that consumed her. She would visit the cathedral church that Ngozi had often gone to. Ngozi had always claimed that the church, and particularly the peace she found speaking to the priest, brought her comfort when the world seemed too heavy to bear. Chinyere walked through the church's heavy wooden doors. The silence wrapped around her like a shroud. She made her way to the confession booth, hoping for a moment of peace, even if just for a fleeting second. As she sat in the booth, waiting for the priest, she closed her eyes and let out a shaky breath. Then, she started, though still unsure of what to say or how to confess the enormity of her betrayal. The words felt lodged in her throat, but she poured it all out. Ngozi's face lingered in her mind as she talked about her sister's innocent smile, her soft laugh, the love that she had thrown away. She continued for almost an hour, and then, the voice came, a soft, familiar voice that made Chinyere's blood run cold. "What took you long enough, sister?" Chinyere's blood ran cold, and her heart stopped for a moment. It wasn't a dream, it wasn't her imagination. It was real. The voice belonged to Ngozi. The words seemed to tilt, and Chinyere's breath caught in her throat. She could hardly believe what she was hearing. She turned slowly, her eyes searching the dim corner where the voice had come from. And there she was, Ngozi, standing before her, calm, composed, her face lit with the faintest smile. Chinyere's mind raced. She couldn't comprehend the reality unfolding before her. Ngozi, alive, not dead, not burned beyond recognition. Ngozi, the sister she had betrayed, was standing in front of her, and the truth of it hit Chinyere like a wave crashing against a fragile shore. "Ngozi," she whispered, her voice trembling. But I thought." "You thought you killed me," Ngozi interrupted, her voice low but steady. She stepped closer, her eyes full of unspoken understanding. "I know, Chinyere. I know exactly what you did. I've known for a long time." Chinyere's mind struggled to keep pace with the flood of emotions crashing over her. "How? How could you have known?" she gasped, her voice barely a whisper. Ngozi smiled, though it was a smile filled with knowing. "Because I've been watching, Chinyere. Watching and listening. Father told me everything before he died. He knew what Kanu and Mrs. Ifani were planning. They wanted to take the family business for themselves. She had been investigating them, uncovering their shady dealings, especially with Mrs. Ifani, who climbed the ladder of a big stakeholder through corruption. And just before the fire, she had planned to meet a lawyer and a female journalist to ensure the evidence got to the right people. "I didn't just disappear that night," Ngozi continued. "I escaped. Through a hidden tunnel in the warehouse, with the lawyer. But the female journalist didn't follow. She claimed she wanted to cover more stories and was the one found dead." The words struck like daggers, each one piercing deeper than the last. Ngozi had known. She had known the plan all along, and had been one step ahead of Chinyere, gathering evidence to expose the conspiracy. The betrayal Chinyere had thought was her secret had never been her own. "You were never meant to be part of their plan," Ngozi said softly, stepping closer. "You were a tool they used, and she paused, her expression hardening, "I was the one they needed to erase." But I'm here, Chinyere. And I've brought all the evidence they didn't want you to find. Tears filled Chinyere's eyes as the enormity of her sister's survivor and the crushing weight of her own choices threatened to drown her. She had fought so long to be seen, to be loved by their father. But in the end, it was Ngozi who had the strength, the foresight, and the wisdom to see through the lies. Every word she spoke crushed Chinyere's defenses, exposing the truth she had tried so hard to bury. "Chinyere," Ngozi said softly, but with a finality that made Chinyere's heart ache. "It's true. I have a child. And I kept him from the family. But father knew. We were both with him when he died. And when it's time, he is the one who will take over. With all you've done, that'll be the punishment." In that moment, Chinyere realized the depth of her loss. Her father's last words had not been about her, but about his true heir, the child Ngozi had kept hidden from the world. The cathedral's silence was deafening as Chinyere sat there, broken and humbled. Ngozi had played the game better, and the consequences of Chinyere's ambition were now clear. The pain of betrayal, of a sister lost and found, would haunt Chinyere forever. The atmosphere in the room was thick with disbelief, as the truth slowly unfolded like a dark tapestry, revealing the betrayal, deceit, and treachery that had been hidden for so long. Chinyere sat in stunned silence, her hands trembling as the pieces of her carefully constructed world crashed down around her. The phone call had come like a thunderclap, shaking her to the core. Kanu, Mrs. Ifani, and several of the family elders, those who had once been loyal to her, were now in police custody, taken for interrogation. The conspiracy, the one she had believed was so neatly tied up, was unraveling before her very eyes. In the midst of the chaos, Ngozi's voice, once thought to be silenced by the flames, now echoed in her mind. It had all been part of her plan. The pieces of her sister's brilliant revenge were falling into place, and Chinyere realized that she had been nothing but a pawn in Ngozi's game all along. The truth cut deep, deeper than the flames that had supposedly consumed her sister. Chinyere had thought that by eliminating Ngozi, she would be the one to claim everything, the wealth, the title, the legacy. But the tables had turned, and she had lost. The walls of the mansion seemed to close in on Chinyere as she stood there beside Ngozi, the weight of the moment pressing down on her like a suffocating fog. The glittering chandeliers above, which once symbolized her rise to power, now seemed to mock her. Ngozi stood tall, her presence a silent declaration of victory. There was no malice in her eyes, no vindictive joy. There was only the quiet strength of someone who had seen the worst of betrayal, who had fought to survive against all odds, and who, in the end, had emerged victorious. As Chinyere watched her sister reclaim the title that had always been rightfully hers, something inside her broke. The inheritance, the business, the power, all of it had slipped through her fingers. And all she had left were the ashes of her own ambition, scattered like dust in the wind. The truth that Kanu had revealed still echoed in her mind. How long had she been blind to the reality that had been unfolding around her? How had she let her jealousy and bitterness consume her so completely that she had destroyed everything she loved? And yet, it wasn't just her sister's absence that had haunted her, it was the realization that Ngozi had always known more than she had let on. That while Chinyere had tried to tear her down, Ngozi had been quietly preparing to rise. Tears welled in Chinyere's eyes, but they weren't tears of anger or regret. They were tears of defeat, the kind of defeat that strips away everything, leaving nothing but a hollow shell of the person she had once been. She had thought she was untouchable, that her ambition would carry her to the top. But now, as Ngozi stood before her, ready to reclaim the business, the family's legacy, Chinyere realized the truth: she had never been in control. As Ngozi smiled at her, the room fell silent once more, the weight of the moment hanging in the air like a thick cloud. Chinyere's shoulders slumped, and she sat down, defeated, in the chair she had once imagined ruling from. The cold reality settled in. The throne she had dreamed of was no longer hers. Ngozi had taken it back, not through force, but through patience, resilience, and the quiet power of knowing who she was and what she stood for. In that moment, Chinyere knew there was no going back. She had lost everything. And there was no one to blame but herself. As the last whispers of betrayal fade into the shadows, Chinyere is left to reckon with the ruins of her ambition. In her relentless pursuit of power, she believed that erasing her sister would secure her place at the top. But in the end, it wasn't greed or ruthlessness that would shape the future, it was Ngozi's quiet resilience, her patience, and her unwavering sense of what truly mattered. Now, as Ngozi steps forward to claim the legacy that was always hers, Chinyere stands in the aftermath, her dreams crumbling before her. The throne she fought so hard to claim has been claimed by another, not through betrayal, but through honor. Chinyere's world is now unrecognizable, one built on lies, shattered by the weight of her own actions. In the end, it wasn't just the inheritance or business that was lost. It was something deeper, the trust, the family bond, the love that she thought she could bend to her will. The belief that power could be seized, that success could be built on the misfortune of others, is the very thing that unraveled everything she worked for. As Ngozi takes her rightful place, there's no joy in the victory. There's only a painful truth that Chinyere must now face: no amount of ambition can ever replace what is lost when you betray the ones who matter most. Power, when built on selfishness, will always come with a cost that Chinyere now knows all too well. But even in this defeat, there is something to be learned, though it may come too late. What happens when we let ambition blind us to the things that truly matter? Can we still find our way back? Ngozi's journey isn't just about reclaiming what was taken from her, it's about standing firm in the face of betrayal and rising above the darkness. Chinyere may have lost everything, but in her loss, there is a quiet warning, a reminder that the price of ambition is never just money or power, but often the very people we thought we could leave behind. Subscribe to Savannah Storytime now and stay tuned for more unforgettable tales, where the truth is always more complicated than it seems, and every decision carries a price.